Okay, this is the second video in a series related to coursework generation in resistant materials GCSE. This video will take us through section 2, which is the research section. We look at the mark scheme quickly just to remind ourselves how this works. You'll see here, of course, at the top, analysing the brief, which is the video that we've previously looked at. Obviously we're on section 2 now, which is research. Now research is a slightly larger section, and we can tell this because it's worth 6 marks rather than 3, and the exam expectation in terms of time was 2 to 3 hours. Okay, let's look at what's expected in each of the mark boundaries so that we understand what we're aiming to do. If we focus in specifically on the top mark boundary, and we set our sights slightly higher, we'll see that we need to ensure within the research section of our folder that we have a selective range of research, that design needs have been identified from the analysis. So when we did our mind map, spider diagram, we were posing questions about things that we needed to find out about. Now obviously within our research this is the time that we want to find out about those things, and we need to consider these words specifically. So the performance, materials, components, processes, quality and sustainability issues of existing products are explored in sufficient detail to aid the writing of the specification. Now the specification is the next section that we're going to be writing after we've done our research. Now, if we look at that top box and then compare it to the next one, you'll see that the difference between 3 to 4 marks or 5 to 6 marks is that this secondary section here, where you've done some sort of product disassembly, you've looked at existing products, is not there. Now, as soon as you don't have a piece of work within your research section, that means that you're then going to be losing marks. And if you don't have something in this box, that means then that you come down into this box, which is 1 to 2 marks out of a possible 6. So when we're doing our work, it's important that we always look at what's expected to get top marks and be trying to aim for that. Okay, so within our research, the first thing that we're going to want to do will be to interview our client or our user group. The sheet for that is going to look like this. Again, a few things to remind you about. We're working in A3 format. We have our title that matches the title font size and style of the other sheets that we've previously done. Okay, and what we're expecting to see on this sheet will be the person you've interviewed. You may reuse the photograph that you've used on your front page, copy and paste it onto here to save time, and similarly then those details just to remind us who you've been interviewing. Okay, you want to aim to do 10 questions, and I would be inclined to, where possible, ask closed questions. Now these are questions that you give options for answers for. For example, very simply, you could be asking which colours your client would prefer, and you would give a range of colours, and they would then tick the box next to the colour that they liked. Okay. The first question I've asked is actually quite general, but I wouldn't expect to see a massive answer to this because it will be things like skateboarding, gangster rap, kittens, ponies, those sorts of things. Question number 2 may relate to the environment. So where is your client expecting to use the product? i.e. will it need to go inside or outside? Does it have to fit in with some sort of decorative style? And that's something that we talked about in our analysis. And you might want to give an option or 2 within here to make this a closed question, have inside, outside or whatever, and then they can tick up for that answer. Other questions might include such things as how much money you want to spend. So it could be relation to cost. It might be that you're going to be asking where or what types of music that your client likes, because that could have some impact. If you're making a radio, you could try and make it then reflect in some way the style or the genre of music that your client listens to. So out of this, you want to try and construct 10 questions and have the answers to all of those questions that you posed in your analysis section. Try to get those answered within this interview. Closed questions, ones that have option boxes, if you want to, some of you will then expand that into actually producing pie charts in terms of answers. Okay, but that's a little extension for some of you if you feel able to do that. Right, the final thing you'll need to do on that sheet will be then to write a conclusion. Okay, so you've done this piece of research, but you want to tell the examiner how that's been useful, how that's going to be useful within your writing of your specification, or how that's going to be useful within your design ideas. Okay, now this piece of research links or leads rather nicely onto then the construction of a mood board. Now you will have done mood boards previously, so that you understand what sort of thing that's going to look like. Obviously we're going to be having, as with our other sheets, the title, matching the font of everything else, and if you've got a border on it, obviously it will have the same border on. Now I've just done some random squares on here, but obviously these will be photographs that you've pulled off the internet that link to the question that you just asked in the interview. You know, what sorts of things are you interested in? And you're going to try and find some images that match those things. Okay, you can see I've put at the top here, look, following my interview, I've collected the following images that were outlined by my client as being possible areas of interest. Now the reason that you want this is obviously that you're going to be using this when you're designing something as a source of inspiration. If you're looking at these things as you're trying to think of ideas, inevitably you'll then come up with a design that suits what it is that your client wants. Now it's not enough just to put pictures on. As well as the pictures, it might be nice if you then had over the top of it your client annotating with bits of text things that they particularly like. So they may see aspects of pictures that they particularly like, and they then may feel the need to write, oh, I really like this. It would be good if you could include this part into here. So to make this piece of work more worthwhile, collect images, but also try and get your client to then annotate on top of that to indicate those things that they particularly liked, or areas that are particularly interesting to them. Okay, so that's the second sheet, which is the mood board, and then that links on rather nicely to the third sheet, which is existing products. So again, we're going to have a title that matches everything else. Similarly, you might have a border. I would expect to see on this sheet, similar to the mood board, but slightly more specific, lots of photos of existing products. If you're making a lamp for your client, then this will contain loads of pictures of lamps. Okay. If you're making a radio, it will have lots of pictures of radios. But what you're trying to do is see what's on the market at the moment, see what sorts of possible things exist. You can use this as a source of inspiration, but it's also useful again to show your client, having collected all these images, your client will perhaps see things that they maybe won't have thought about. For example, they'll see features on radios that they really like. So the front of this radio, for example, may light up. Yeah, so your client may write, I really love that. If you can, try and include that into my product when you make it. Okay, so similar with the mood board, there's going to be pictures, but the pictures on this sheet are going to relate to the product that you're going to be making. They're not going to be related to the interests of your client, which is what the mood board is all about. When you come into the design ideas bit, obviously what you're going to be trying to do is bring these two things together. The things that they are interested in together with existing products. Okay, so we would expect to see on this sheet photographs of existing products, but it's really important that once again you get some notes written by your client or yourself following a conversation with your client that indicate bits and pieces that they particularly liked or found interesting. Okay, that brings us on to our fourth sheet. If you're making a product, obviously it's sensible to do some sort of disassembly. Now basically what that means is you're going to look at a product in real detail. If you have the product physically, you're able to take it apart and to look at how that whole thing gets put together. But the key words that we need to mention within this sheet are given here. So you need to have a subheading, talks about the performance of the product, how well you think it does its job, talked about the materials that have been used, and be specific in here. Don't just be saying wood, metal and plastic, actually be specific and indicate if there's an aluminium tuner on this radio, then you will indicate that as being aluminium. Okay, the components, the parts that make up the product, the processes, which means how that thing has been made. Maybe it's been moulded, or has it been constructed by hand if it's a one-off product. So try and make some judgment about how that product was made, the quality of that product, and then look at this key word again. We come back to sustainability. And remember, that's all about whether the materials that have been used within the product are from sustainable sources. Okay, so you need to use those words around the outside of pictures, and this is an example of how that sheet might look. You're going to have your title on there. You're going to have some photographs of the existing product that you've looked at or taken apart, and then you're going to be using these keywords as subheadings and making some judgment underneath those about your opinion of how that product was made, what it's made of, and so on. Okay, so this sheet here is going to have a lot more writing on it in comparison to the other sheets, but this one is key to addressing those issues that are outlined within the mark scheme. Yeah, if you go back to the mark scheme, remind ourselves what that looks like. What we're aiming to do is this box here, and you'll see those words again: performance, materials, components, processes. Okay, those are the ones that we need to mention. Right,